Team Baxter.
Opening up bag F. Bag F contains links and a battery tray. Battery tray is a small little guy. It takes a special size battery. So this is a floating battery tray. It's held by a couple screws and can kind of move around, blah blah blah. There are lots of rods in here. The way that Vaterra dealt with the extra long wheelbase was to add spacers. You can see one of the spacers right there in the packaging. These spacers go at the ends of the long rods, and that's how they get the rod length to an acceptable length for the blazer body. So there's all the links and rods, and here's all the spacers that will be inserted at the ends of these rods, like so. So anyway, I'm going to get these put away before they roll all over the place and get these links put together. I'm building the links here. I got a couple of them built already, and I'm lining up the parts to build the rest of them. During the unboxing, I noticed that there were a couple of rod ends in the tool bag. I didn't know what those rod ends were, but I thought it was kind of odd that rod ends were included in the tools. I was worried about the plastic, but what's really going on is it's an omission. I have an addendum that came in bag F for the panhard bar, and these rod ends are for that length. You can't make all 8 links without these 2 extra rod ends. So there they are, and I'll continue to make all 8 links. So I've got the links made all with the spacers in them for wheelbase 4 for the blazer body. These links will help me install the rear and front axles that are previously made and the shocks that I made in the last step onto the chassis. A quick look at the front and rear axles before I attach them to the chassis. Here's the links I just made. You've got one going across the panhead bar. You have your 3-link suspension bar and the 2 at the bottom. This attaches to the side of the chassis up near the skid plate, and the 2 lower ones attach at the bottom of the skid plate as well. Same thing goes for the rear, bottom of the skid plate and up above the skid plate. The links don't bend out as well as I kind of would expect them to. Maybe that's intentional so that they don't move all over the place, but it's a pretty stiff fit. That's probably the end of the movement, and that's just about where they need to be, so that could be very well intentional. The shocks, of course, attached to the shock hoops, and they are attached to the same point where the lower links are. Not a big fan of this. It makes it a little difficult to get your shocks off without the whole bottom falling apart, but that's the way it is, and so we're gonna have to deal with. So these get screwed onto the chassis now, and that'll pretty much finish up the chassis completion, with the exception of the transmission, until I install electronics. So what that was is me drilling the hole for the pin that wasn't drilled in the first place, for the pin that holds the 2 lower links in. So I drilled that out, but I don't have the screws for the link because they weren't included in the kit. But what was included was the wrong screws. So I'm gonna add my own screws because I just happen to have them and get this thing put together the way it's supposed to be, but not the way the manual says, because the manual's printed wrong. So I've completed the chassis. Everything's secure except for the panhard bar. I've used all the screws that come with the kit, and I am left with 2 nuts and a small screw, which I have no purpose for, and the manual doesn't show me where it goes. I just so happen to have the right size screw in my extra screw bin, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. I've gone over the manual many times to make sure I haven't done anything wrong, and I haven't. Also, the rear shocks are in a back facing position. The geometry of the shocks in the back were just wrong, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. The problem was that I built the lower links incorrectly. I'll flip this over so you can get a better look. So I built the upper and lower rear links with 1 spacer instead of 2. Vaterra uses spacers in order to get this wheelbase where they wanted it for the K5 Blazer body. So with the different wheelbase lengths, you use different amounts of spacers or no spacers at all. With wheelbase 4, which is the longest wheelbase and what I'm working on here, it requires 2 spacers as now installed, and you also have to install the longer drive shaft that's included in the box. They give you an extra drive shaft with no explanation. One is short and one is long. So what I've done now is put the longer end on, since we have an elongated rear end now. So that's been addressed, and note taken to watch the manual and make sure you build the links the right size. So I'm going to use my extra screw to get my panhard bar installed, and that's the chassis.